All right, here's another one of my favorite categories, another honorable mention. This is Steve number 3. Steve had for your 1964 MOULTON SPEEDSIX.
All right.
A brilliant machine. Not much question about that one.
And a very personal story, close to Moulton himself.
Yes, right to the core.
I did the first ride about 2 years ago. At that time, I had one of the new MOULTON Speeds. And coming to the ride, I looked at all the vintage English bikes and got on the phone next day and called Sean Moulton, Alex's nephew, and I said, I really need a vintage Moulton to do this ride every year with. And do you know anyone that has anything for sale, or you can just put something in a box and send it over to me? And a couple weeks later, box shows up, and we're getting ready for Interbike for the bike show, and we're busy. I don't open this thing up, so I think in the spring I decided I'm going to open up the box, and there's a SpeedSix in it. And so I was, Sean, so I called Sean up, and I was embarrassed because I hadn't called him, right away telling him this is a great bike. So I had to, drop it into a conversation, about the SpeedSix, and I wanted to find out where he had gotten it. And what this bike was, this was Alex's secretary's bike. This John Benjamin, who's been with Alex since probably the early '60s or even mid '50s, being his secretary. And got the bike, and basically this is how it was out of the box. The only difference, or the only change I've made to it, is I had to take the front chain guard off it, and I had to get the rear derailleur working. And from looking at the bike, I'm sure that the bike was never shifted, and it never had the rear derailleur hooked up. And even when it is hooked up, as you see, it doesn't work very well. But he had it locked in the middle gear, and the chain guard is I don't know if there's a Moulton, I should have brought the chain guard with, but the chain guard is a chrome chain guard that was made to fit on a Moulton standard, clamps on this tube, and it's narrow and skinny and drops over the chain. So any shifting that I did out of that middle gear, the chain was rattling against the chain guard, either if I went up or down. The other change I did I did put some cloth tape on it. It came with the old, I don't know what they call them, the old sponge grips.
Right.
What are these?
I was trying to figure that out. I thought it was some sort of a
Self-adjuster?
No, I think it opens up the brakes a little bit. It's just when they're down, see, when we go like this, they open up more, and they give you they don't give you much. They give you maybe an eighth of an inch.
Somebody said it's a quick release so
Yeah,
that
it
you
gives
can
you
get the wheels out.
about an eighth of an inch.
Okay, so you can
Here.
pop the wheels out of there without removing the brake pads or loosening the cable.
Right. And but it's amazing how close the ride is to a modern Moulton. I mean, the ride, when you're riding it, it feels like riding a new one.
How many TPI is it?
It's 60. And
60. Holy.
no, the chain ring's a TA. But one of the things what's interesting about the Moulton Speed series is that what Alex's idea is that he wanted to be able to sell the standard Moulton, like what we have. I think that's a mini though, isn't it?
No,
Is that standard? Okay. He wanted to sell that bike that if you take the racks off, you can race the bike. So you can use it during touring for the week, or commuting to work on the weekend, you can race your bike. But what he did is, in his factory, he had what we're all familiar with a little bit with Specialized's S-Works. Moulton in the '60s had what was called his M-Works, and he had an ex-British Olympian that headed up that department. He's the one that modified all his trick Moultons. And there's a couple real interesting things about the bike. One is it's for it has internal cables for a bike done in the '60s. It also has an 11-tooth cog, which he had the rear clusters specially made for these bikes. So again, there's really nothing new. When he was working on this bicycle development, he was actually building disc wheels at that time, which he was messing around with, but he never put into production. I've seen some of the samples when I've been there.
What were they made from?
They're made out of fiberglass. There wasn't much carbon at the time, so they were heavy. And one of the first F-frame bikes too was his first model was actually a monocoque bike. It was all aluminum or steel that was all not riveted, actually riveted together.
Tell us a bit more about the suspensions. People unfamiliar with the Moultons might be surprised about how innovative the suspension system when it first came out in '61.
Yeah, 61 or 62. I mean, he was working on them before that. Moulton's background was his family was in the rubber business in England from the mid-1800s, and after the war, he started working on in the rubber factory, developing a way to use rubber more for suspension. And one of the things is the Austin Mini, or the
Cooper Mini.
Yeah,
now.
Cooper Mini, whatever it is now. But that doesn't use the same suspension. But anyways, it's that same thing. He decided to incorporate rubber into his rear suspension. So with this back, the back suspension here is actually a vulcanized rubber piece. And I don't know if you can see it work here, but it just is enough to give you some nice suspension, and you can you basically change your suspension rate by just tightening the bolts here. There's some little plastic washers in here, and by just tweaking them a little bit, you can adjust your suspension. The front suspension on this one, I don't think is adjustable. I've never tried to adjust it, but it's there's just a large spring in here, and and then it dampens, and it just gives you a nice ride. I mean, this is 40 some years old, and it's still working good. What his we look at a new. You look at the new one, it's a little bit different suspension, but his idea is when he was first looking at the mountain bikes with dual suspension, he thought they were just really, very unsophisticated. I don't think I can do it on this one, but his idea is how you test suspension is you grab the saddle and you push down, and even with a little pressure, you can see this thing move, and both the front and the rear wheels move at the same rate.
And wasn't his suspension system patented, and so it was decades before anybody came up with something comparable, but
Right.
with a different design?
Right, yeah, and there's still patents on a bunch of stuff. This one doesn't have it. This one will have his list
Was
of
the
patents.
was the radial scoping on the front wheel standard?
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think of the person, and the guy that built these wheels died, I think, a year or two ago, but he was the Moulton wheel builder until then. He was in his 80s, and he was still building the wheels at the factory.
Wow.
The rear on this one is air light hub. The front one's Melremo. And so I don't know if the rear wheels got switched somewhere from the time the bike was new, or just the way that it was built.
That one looks original. Is that a different material? A front
Yes,
rail?
an alloy
It's
hub and alloy rim.
I noticed you have different stems on the inner tubes too. You got a Presta back there and a Schrader on the front.
Well, actually, the front one is a reed valve.
Oh.
Yeah, so and I was wondering how I was going to pump that up. So I asked my one of the guys that works for me, Paul, who's worked with Terry Cell for years. He said, "Oh, you just put a Presta valve on there. It's a reed valve, but we still get unicycles coming in with valves like that from Germany. You just Presta valve, your Presta valve pump just fits over and fills it up. But you take this cap off. There's actually a reed in there." And that comes out, and that reed, and so it's flared. It lets the air go one way. As long as you keep your bike from rolling, you can lean it against anything.
Oh, okay.
And does anyone remember those?
Yeah.
Okay. So anyways, that's how this works. You just push it in, it locks your front wheel, you can lean it.
Okay.
Thanks very much, Steve.